I never thought a pile of gravel would nearly bankrupt me. But that's exactly what happened when Sharon Winters from the Meadowbrook Estates HOA decided my property was her personal kingdom to rule. It started on a Tuesday morning in late March when I was standing in my driveway in Asheville, North Carolina, watching the delivery truck dump 3 tons of crushed limestone exactly where I'd planned. I'm Connor Adams, and I'd lived in Meadowbrook Estates for 6 years without any real problems. Sure, the HOA had their quirks, sending out reminders about trash can placement and the occasional note about lawn height, but nothing that made me regret buying my house on Pinecrest Drive. That morning, though, everything changed. The limestone pile sat about 15 feet from my driveway, right where my property line met a small wooded area. I was planning to use it for a drainage project that would finally solve the water pooling problem in my backyard. The previous winter had been brutal, and every time it rained, my back patio turned into a small lake. I'd consulted with a landscaper, got all my plans together, and ordered the materials. Everything was by the book, or so I thought. I'd barely had time to sign the delivery receipt when I saw Sharon's silver Mercedes pulling up to the curb. She got out with that particular expression I'd come to recognize over the years, the one where her lips pursed so tight they practically disappeared, and her eyes narrowed like she was inspecting a crime scene. Sharon was in her mid-50s, always dressed like she was heading to a country club board meeting even when she was just patrolling the neighborhood looking for violations. "Connor," she called out, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "What exactly is this?" I wiped my hands on my jeans and walked over. "Morning, Sharon. It's limestone for my drainage project. Been planning it for months." She pulled out her phone and started taking pictures, circling the pile like a detective documenting evidence. "This is completely unacceptable. You can't just dump materials on HOA common area without board approval." I felt my stomach drop. "Common area? Sharon, this is my property. I'm standing well within my property lines." "I don't think so." She stopped taking pictures and looked at me with this triumphant expression. "This area has always been part of the green belt. I've lived here 12 years, Connor. I know every inch of this neighborhood." I pulled out my phone and opened the photos I'd taken of my property survey when I bought the house. "Look, I have the survey right here. My property extends 20 feet past where that pile is sitting. I'm not even close to the edge of my land." Sharon barely glanced at my phone. "That survey is 6 years old. Things change. Boundaries get reassessed. The HOA had some boundary clarifications done 3 years ago." "Nobody ever notified me of any boundary changes," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "And I'm pretty sure you can't just change property lines without owner consent and proper legal procedures." She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Well, the board will be reviewing this at our meeting Thursday night. I suggest you attend. Until then, I'm issuing a formal notice of violation." She pulled a pre-printed form from her designer handbag, filled in a few lines, and handed it to me. "You have 72 hours to remove the material, or fines will begin accruing at $50 per day." I stared at the paper in disbelief. "Sharon, this is ridiculous. I'm not removing anything until I see proof that this isn't my property." "Then I guess you'll be paying fines." She walked back to her Mercedes, heels clicking on the asphalt. "See you Thursday, Connor, 7 p.m. sharp." I spent the rest of that day fuming. I called my real estate attorney, Mitchell Stevens, who'd handled my house purchase. His secretary said he was in court but would call me back. I dug out all my closing documents, spreading them across my dining room table. Every single paper confirmed what I already knew. My property line was clearly marked, professionally surveyed and legally recorded with Buncombe County. Mitchell called back around 5. "Connor, good to hear from you. What's going on?" I explained the situation, reading him the exact wording on Sharon's violation notice. He was quiet for a moment after I finished. "Okay, first thing, don't remove that pile. If it's on your property, which I'm confident it is based on the survey we used at closing, then the HOA has no authority. Second, attend that meeting Thursday, but don't go in hostile. Let them make their case, take notes, and we'll respond appropriately. What if they start fining me? Let them. We'll fight it. But Connor, I want you to do something for me. Go to the county assessor's office tomorrow and get a current copy of your property plat. Also request any recent surveys or boundary adjustments filed for your neighborhood. If the HOA really did have some boundary work done, it'll be on record." The next morning, I took half a day off work and drove to the Buncombe County offices downtown. The clerk at the assessor's office was helpful, pulling up my property records on her computer. She printed everything they had on file: my original survey, the property plat, tax records, and a list of any recent filings related to Meadowbrook Estates. "Looks like there was a survey done for the common areas about 3 years ago," she said, highlighting a line on the printout. "But that wouldn't affect individual property lines. Those only change with owner consent and formal legal procedures. Let me check something else." She typed for a minute, scrolling through screens. "Yeah, no boundary changes filed for your address. Your property lines are exactly as they were when you purchased." I felt vindication surge through me. "Can I get copies of all this?" "Absolutely. Give me a few minutes." I left the county office with a thick folder of documents, every one of them confirming I was right. The limestone pile was on my property, probably by a good 10 feet. Sharon was either mistaken or deliberately trying to overreach her authority. Thursday evening came faster than I wanted. I'd spent the previous day working from home, occasionally glancing out my window at the limestone pile like it might spontaneously move just to spite me. The fine period hadn't technically started yet, since I had 72 hours from Tuesday morning, but I knew Sharon would be pushing for immediate action at the meeting. The HOA meetings were held in the community clubhouse, a modest building near the neighborhood entrance that mostly served as a gathering space for the occasional social event. When I arrived at 6:50, there were already about 20 people scattered across the folding chairs. Sharon sat at a table up front with 2 other board members, Robert Martinez, the treasurer, and Patricia Calhoun, the secretary. Robert was a quiet guy in his 60s who mostly went along with whatever Sharon wanted. Patricia was newer to the board, only elected last fall, and I didn't know much about her. I took a seat in the 3rd row, my folder of documents on my lap. A few neighbors nodded at me. The guy next to me, Bill from 2 streets over, leaned in and whispered, "Heard you got crossways with Sharon. Good luck, man." Sharon called the meeting to order at 7 sharp. She went through the usual agenda items: financial report, upcoming neighborhood events, a discussion about repainting the clubhouse. Then she got to new business and her eyes locked onto me. "We have a significant violation to address," she began, pulling up photos on her laptop that projected onto a screen behind the table. There was my limestone pile, looking oddly menacing in her photographs. "Connor Adams has placed approximately 3 tons of material on HOA common area without board approval or proper permits. This is a clear violation of our covenants regarding common area maintenance and modification." Several people turned to look at me. I felt my face heat up but stayed quiet. Remembering Mitchell's advice, Sharon continued, "The board proposes immediate removal of the material and a fine structure of $50 per day, until compliance is achieved. This sets a precedent for property maintenance standards and respect for our shared spaces. Patricia raised her hand slightly. Sharon, has Connor responded to the violation notice? He disputes the violation, Sharon said dismissively. Claims the pile is on his property, but as we all know, that area has been part of our green belt for years. I've personally watched children play in those woods since I moved here. That was news to me. I'd never seen kids playing anywhere near that section, mainly because it was thick with undergrowth and poison ivy. Can we hear from Connor? Patricia asked, looking past Sharon to me. Sharon's jaw tightened, but she nodded curtly. Fine. Connor, you have 3 minutes. I stood up, folder in hand. Thanks. I understand the board's concern about property standards, but this violation notice is based on incorrect information. The limestone pile is located entirely on my property, well within my legal boundaries. I pulled out the survey and held it up. This is my property survey from when I purchased the house 6 years ago. I also went to the county assessor's office and confirmed that no boundary changes have been filed for my property. I walked forward and handed copies to each board member. You'll see the measurements clearly show my property line extends significantly past where the pile is located. I'm actually about 15 feet inside my own property line. Robert studied the papers, his brow furrowed. Patricia did the same, flipping through the pages carefully. Sharon barely looked at them. Surveys can be wrong, Sharon said, and old surveys don't reflect current conditions. The HOA had professional work done 3 years ago that clearly established our common areas. Then I'd like to see that survey, I said. Because according to the county, no boundary modifications have been filed for my property. Individual property lines can't be changed without owner notification and consent. That's North Carolina law. A murmur went through the other homeowners. A woman in the back raised her hand. Sharon, do we have the survey Connor's talking about? The one from 3 years ago, Sharon's face flushed. It's in our files somewhere. The point is, this is disruptive to the neighborhood aesthetic and potentially dangerous. That pile is an eyesore and could attract pests. It's temporary, I said. I'm using it for a drainage project. It'll be gone within 2 weeks once I complete the work. On HOA property, Sharon insisted. Patricia set down the papers. Sharon, I think we need to table this until we can verify the property lines. If Connor's survey is accurate and the county has no record of changes, then we don't have grounds for a violation. I second that, Robert said quietly. Sharon looked like she'd swallowed something bitter. Fine. We'll get our own survey done. But Connor, that pile stays put at your own risk. If it turns out you're wrong, the fines will be retroactive. That's not how fines work, I said. You can't retroactively fine someone for something that wasn't a violation when you assess the fine. We'll see about that. Sharon shuffled her papers aggressively. Meeting adjourned. People filed out, several stopping to talk to me. Bill clapped me on the shoulder. Man, you really got under her skin. Sharon hates being challenged. I'm just defending my property rights, I said. Yeah, well, watch yourself. Sharon's got a mean streak when she doesn't get her way. I drove home feeling a mix of satisfaction and anxiety. I'd made my case, but Sharon clearly wasn't backing down. This was going to get worse before it got better. The next morning, Friday, I was proven right. I woke up to find a bright orange sticker plastered across my front door. Violation, unauthorized construction materials, daily fines in effect. The date stamp showed it had been placed at 6 a.m. I called Mitchell immediately. They're proceeding with the fines even though the board tabled the issue last night. He sighed heavily. Okay, this is harassment now. I'm going to send a cease and desist letter today. Don't pay any fines. Document everything. Take photos of any notices they give you and keep a log of all interactions with Sharon or other board members. Over the weekend, I tried to ignore the situation and focus on starting my drainage project. I couldn't use the limestone yet since it had become the center of this dispute, but I could prep the area. I spent Saturday digging trenches in my backyard, mapping out where the French drain would run. My neighbor to the right, an older woman named Dorothy, came over with lemonade around noon. "Heard you're having trouble with the HOA," she said, handing me a cold glass. "Word travels fast. Sharon called me yesterday, asking if I'd seen you dump materials on common ground. I told her I watched the whole delivery and it was clearly on your property. She didn't like that answer." I wiped sweat from my forehead. "Thanks for backing me up, Dorothy. Honey, I've lived here 15 years. Sharon's been on a power trip since she got elected board president 4 years ago. Somebody needs to stand up to her. Just be careful, she plays dirty." Dorothy's warning echoed in my head all weekend. On Monday, I found another violation notice, this one claiming my trash cans were visible from the street, which they weren't. I'd wheeled them back to their designated spot behind my fence Sunday evening like always. I took photos proving they were properly stored and added the notice to my growing file. Mitchell's cease and desist letter arrived at Sharon's house on Tuesday via certified mail. I know because she called me that evening, her voice shaking with rage. "How dare you sick a lawyer on me? I'm volunteering my time to maintain this neighborhood's standards, and you treat me like a criminal. Sharon, you're fining me for something that isn't a violation. What did you expect me to do? I expected you to be a team player, to respect the community you chose to live in." "I do respect it. That's why I'm following the actual rules instead of made-up ones. Have you gotten that survey yet? The one that supposedly proves I'm on common ground." She was silent for a moment. "The board is reviewing options." "So, no survey. It's being handled." "And Connor, you should know that the board met in emergency session last night. We've voted to pursue legal action if you don't remove the materials by this Friday." My turn to be silent. An emergency session without proper notice to homeowners was actually a violation of the HOA's own bylaws, but I wasn't sure if that battle was worth fighting right now. "Do what you feel you need to do, Sharon. So will I." She hung up without another word. Wednesday brought a new development. I came home from work to find survey stakes driven into my yard, little orange flags fluttering in the breeze. They formed a line about 5 feet into my property from where the limestone pile sat. A business card was tucked under my doormat. Precision Land Surveys, LLC. Contracted by Meadowbrook Estates HOA. I called the number immediately. A man answered on the third ring. "Precision Land Surveys, this is Dave speaking." "Hi, this is Connor Adams. Your company just surveyed my property at 847 Pinecrest Drive, and I need to know what you found." "Let me pull up the file." "Adams, you said. Yeah, we completed a boundary verification this afternoon. Are you the homeowner?" "I am." "Can you tell me the results?" Papers rustled on his end. "According to our survey, which we conducted using GPS equipment and compared against county records, your property line runs approximately 19.7 feet from your driveway's eastern edge into the wooded area. The pile of material we observed is sitting at about 14 feet from the driveway edge, so it's well within your property boundaries." Relief flooded through me. "Can you send me a copy of that survey? Our contract is with the HOA, so they'll receive the official report." "But there's no reason you can't request a copy from them or order your own separate survey. The boundaries are public record anyway." "Right. Thanks, Dave." "No problem. For what it's worth, your measurements match the existing survey on file with the county." Pretty straightforward property line situation. I immediately called Mitchell with the update. He was pleased. Good. Now we wait for the HOA to receive the report and acknowledge their mistake. If Sharon's reasonable, this ends here. I don't think reasonable is in her vocabulary. Then we'll proceed accordingly. Thursday afternoon, I received an email from Patricia Calhoun, the HOA secretary. Unlike Sharon's usual terse communications, this one was almost apologetic in tone. Connor, the board has received the survey results from Precision Land Surveys. The report confirms that the limestone pile is located on your property and does not encroach on HOA common areas. However, Sharon has raised concerns about the extended timeline for your project and what she terms ongoing blight. She's requesting that you provide a detailed schedule for completion and consider screening the pile from view in the meantime. The board will be discussing this at our next regular meeting on April 15th. Regards, Patricia. I read the email twice. So Sharon was still trying to find some angle to maintain control. The pile had been there less than 2 weeks, and my original timeline had always been around 30 days to complete the entire drainage project. This was pure harassment. I replied to Patricia, copying Sharon and Robert. Thank you for confirming the survey results. As I stated at the last meeting, this is a temporary situation related to an active home improvement project. The materials will be used progressively over the next 2 to 3 weeks. There is no requirement in our HOA covenants for screening temporary construction materials on private property, nor for providing detailed project schedules to the board for work conducted entirely on one's own land. I appreciate the board's attention to this matter and consider it resolved. Sharon's response came within 10 minutes. This is far from resolved. See you at the next meeting. The weekend passed quietly. I made good progress on the drainage project, using about a third of the limestone to line the first section of the French drain. The pile was visibly smaller, which should have satisfied any reasonable person's concerns about timeline. I even took progress photos, just in case. On Monday morning, I woke up to my doorbell ringing insistently. I stumbled downstairs in my pajamas, expecting a package delivery. Instead, Sharon stood on my porch with a man in a suit I didn't recognize. Connor Adams, the man asked. Yeah, who are you? He handed me a folded document. You've been served. Have a good day. He walked back to a black sedan parked on the street while Sharon remained on my porch, arms crossed, looking satisfied. What is this? I unfolded the papers, scanning quickly. It was a lawsuit filed by the Meadowbrook Estates HOA seeking an injunction to force removal of the limestone pile, plus damages for diminished property values and aesthetic harm to the community. You're suing me, after your own survey proved I was right. We're protecting the neighborhood, Sharon said. Just because something is technically on your property doesn't mean you can do whatever you want. There are standards, Connor. Community standards that you clearly don't respect. This is insane. You're wasting HOA funds on a frivolous lawsuit. The membership will support us. You're the one who's been uncooperative and hostile from the start. I've been defending my legal rights. There's a difference. She turned to leave, then paused. You know what your problem is, Connor? You think rules don't apply to you. That you're special somehow. Well, you're not. You're just another homeowner and you'll follow the same standards as everyone else. I closed the door and immediately called Mitchell. He told me to come to his office right away and bring the lawsuit papers. An hour later, I sat in Mitchell's downtown office while he reviewed the complaint. He shook his head periodically, making notes in the margins. This is one of the most poorly constructed lawsuits I've seen in years, he finally said. They're claiming you're creating a nuisance, but their own survey disproves any property line violation. The damages they're seeking are speculative and unsupported by any evidence, and they're asking for attorney's fees even though they have no legal basis for the suit. So, we can beat this easily. But Connor, it's going to cost you money and time. Even a frivolous lawsuit requires a response, court appearances, and legal work. I'd estimate you're looking at $10,000 to $15,000 in legal fees to see this through trial. I felt sick. Can we countersue? Absolutely. We can file a counterclaim for harassment, abuse of process, and your legal fees. But that extends the timeline and complexity. My recommendation is we file a motion to dismiss. Argue that the HOA has no standing to sue since you haven't violated any enforceable covenant, and push for sanctions against their attorney for filing a frivolous suit. Do it. All of it. I'm not letting Sharon bully me off my own property. Mitchell nodded. I'll have the motion drafted by end of week. In the meantime, continue documenting everything. And Connor, be prepared for this to get uglier before it gets better. He was right. Over the next 3 weeks, Sharon escalated her campaign against me in ways I hadn't thought possible. She sent violation notices for invented infractions. My mailbox was supposedly 6 inches too far left. My house numbers weren't the approved font. My landscaping included unauthorized plant species. Every single claim was bogus, but each one required time and energy to document and refute. She also started a whisper campaign in the neighborhood. I'd hear from friendly neighbors about rumors Sharon was spreading, that I was planning to run a business from my home, that I'd been rude and threatening to board members, that I was planning to sue every homeowner in Meadowbrook Estates. None of it was true, but mud sticks. The April 15th board meeting arrived. This time, about 40 people showed up, nearly triple the usual attendance. Sharon had clearly been rallying supporters. I brought Mitchell with me, and his presence seemed to unsettle Sharon. She opened the meeting with a long speech about community values and the importance of maintaining standards. Then, she addressed the lawsuit. As many of you know, the board has taken the difficult step of pursuing legal action against a homeowner who has repeatedly refused to comply with our covenants. This isn't a decision we made lightly, but when someone places their individual desires above the community's well-being, we have to act. A woman in the front row I didn't recognize raised her hand. But Sharon, didn't the survey show he was on his own property? Sharon's smile tightened. The survey showed the pile is technically within his property boundaries, yes. But that doesn't address the broader issues of community standards and aesthetic maintenance. Our covenants give the board authority to regulate activities that impact neighborhood appearance and property values. Mitchell stood up. Actually, they don't. May I? Sharon looked like she wanted to refuse, but with 40 sets of eyes watching, she nodded stiffly. Mitchell moved to the front of the room. I'm Mitchell Stevens, representing Connor Adams. I've reviewed your HOA covenants in detail, and there is no provision granting the board authority to regulate temporary construction materials located entirely on private property. The architectural review process applies to permanent structures and modifications, not to short-term projects. He pulled out a copy of the covenants and held it up. Furthermore, the board's own survey confirmed that Mr. Adams is not encroaching on common areas. The lawsuit filed against him has no legal merit and constitutes harassment. I've filed a motion to dismiss and am pursuing sanctions against the HOA's attorney for bringing a frivolous action. The room erupted in conversation. Several people were nodding. Others looked confused. Sharon banged her gavel repeatedly. That's your interpretation, she said loudly. The board has legal counsel who disagrees. Then your legal counsel is wrong. Mitchell said calmly. "And when this case is dismissed, the HOA will be liable for Mr. Adams's legal fees, which are currently approaching $12,000 and climbing daily." More murmurs. Robert, the treasurer, looked uncomfortable. "Sharon, I wasn't aware our potential liability was that high." "It's a negotiating tactic," Sharon said dismissively. "It's a statement of fact," Mitchell corrected. "My invoices are available for inspection if the board requests them." Patricia spoke up. "I move that we table the lawsuit and pursue mediation with Connor to resolve this matter." "Second," Robert said immediately. Sharon's face went red. "You can't just undermine the board president like this." "We're not undermining you," Patricia said. "We're trying to protect the HOA from a costly legal judgment. If Connor's attorney is right, and I think he might be, we're exposing every homeowner in Meadowbrook to liability for your personal vendetta." "Personal vendetta? How dare you? I'm protecting property values." An older man in the back stood up. "Sharon, I've been watching this whole thing unfold, and Patricia's right. You've been targeting Connor for weeks over something that your own survey proved wasn't a violation. That pile of gravel or limestone or whatever isn't hurting anyone. My property value isn't dropping because Connor's doing a drainage project." Several people voiced agreement. Sharon looked around the room, seeming to realize she was losing control. "Fine," she snapped. "We'll vote. All in favor of pursuing mediation and dropping the lawsuit." Hands went up around the room, including Robert's and Patricia's. The vote was overwhelming. All opposed. Only Sharon and two other people raised their hands. "Motion carries," Patricia said, writing in her notes. "Sharon, please contact the HOA's attorney and inform them we're withdrawing the suit." Sharon gathered her papers with jerky, angry movements. "This meeting is adjourned." She stood up and walked out without another word, leaving Robert and Patricia at the table looking at each other awkwardly. Several neighbors came up to me afterward, apologizing for Sharon's behavior and expressing support. Bill clapped me on the back. "Man, you really did it. Nobody stood up to her like that before." "I just defended my property," I said. "Shouldn't have had to be a big production." Dorothy, my neighbor with the lemonade, smiled. "You did more than that, honey. You showed everyone that Sharon isn't untouchable. Board elections are coming up in a few months. I bet we see some changes." Mitchell and I walked out to the parking lot together. "That went better than expected," he said. "Once the lawsuit is formally withdrawn, we can discuss whether you want to pursue your counterclaims or just let it go." "Can I think about it?" "Of course. My advice would be to let it go if they're backing down. Sometimes the victory is enough." Over the next week, things were quiet. Too quiet, actually. No violation notices appeared on my door. No angry phone calls. No mysterious survey stakes in my yard. I completed my drainage project, using up the last of the limestone and finishing the French drain installation. It worked perfectly. The next time it rained, my patio stayed dry for the first time in years. I thought maybe, just maybe, it was over. Then, on a Monday morning in early May, I got a call from Robert Martinez, the HOA treasurer. "Connor, this is Robert. Can you meet me for coffee this afternoon? There's something you need to know about." We met at a cafe near downtown Asheville. Robert looked nervous, stirring his coffee obsessively without drinking it. "What's going on?" I asked. He pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. "Patricia and I have been reviewing the HOA's financial records. Sharon's always handled most of the bookkeeping herself, but after the blow-up at the last meeting, we insisted on doing a full audit. Connor, there are serious problems." I opened the folder. Inside were bank statements, receipts, and handwritten notes in Patricia's neat script. As I read, my stomach sank. "She's been stealing from the HOA?" I asked quietly. "We think so." There are unexplained withdrawals going back almost 3 years. Cash payments for services that were never rendered. Vendors we supposedly paid that don't exist when we try to contact them. We're talking about somewhere between $40,000 and $60,000. I sat back, trying to process this. That's embezzlement. That's a crime. I know. Patricia and I are meeting with a forensic accountant tomorrow. But Connor, there's more. We found correspondence between Sharon and a law firm in Charlotte. She was apparently trying to get them to file a lien against your property based on the supposed violation. Can she do that? No, which is why the law firm declined. But she tried. She also contacted code enforcement with the county, claiming you were running an illegal dump site. They investigated and found nothing, obviously, but she's been waging a campaign against you behind the scenes that goes way beyond what happened at board meetings. I didn't know what to say. The woman was unhinged. Why are you telling me this? I finally asked. Because you deserve to know. And because Patricia and I are going to the police with the financial evidence. This is going to blow up the HOA for a while, and you'll probably get dragged into it since you were one of Sharon's targets. I wanted you to hear it from us first. 2 days later, I was working from home when I heard sirens on the street. I looked out my window to see 2 Asheville Police Department cruisers and an unmarked sedan parked in front of Sharon's house, 4 doors down from mine. Officers went inside, and about 20 minutes later they came out with Sharon in handcuffs. The neighborhood grapevine went into overdrive. By evening, everyone knew Sharon had been arrested for embezzlement and fraud. The amounts kept growing in the retelling, and I heard everything from $60,000 to $200,000. The real number, it turned out, was $73,000 over a period of 3.5 years. Mitchell called me that evening. Saw the news about your HOA president. That's quite a development. Robert gave me a heads up a couple days ago. I still can't believe it. Well, it explains her behavior. People who are engaged in criminal activity often deflect by attacking others aggressively. She was probably terrified you'd start looking too closely at HOA finances if you got involved in board disputes. Going after you for that pile was a way to keep you on the defensive. Seems like it backfired. Spectacularly. You'll probably be called as a witness at some point, just to establish the pattern of harassment. But Connor, this should be the end of your HOA troubles. With Sharon facing criminal charges and likely removal from the board, you'll have a clean slate. The preliminary hearing was set for June. In the meantime, Patricia was appointed interim board president, and she immediately issued a formal apology to me on behalf of the HOA. All fines were withdrawn, all violation notices rescinded. The HOA's attorney sent a letter officially dropping the lawsuit and acknowledging it should never have been filed. I ran into Patricia at the grocery store a week after Sharon's arrest. She looked exhausted. "How are you holding up?" I asked. "Barely." The forensic accountant's report was devastating. Sharon was siphoning money through fake vendor accounts, inflated service contracts, and just straight cash withdrawals that she'd mark as legitimate expenses. She used HOA money to renovate her kitchen, take vacations, even bought a boat. A boat. Seriously, a boat. Kept it at her sister's place in Charleston. The arrogance is stunning. Are the HOA finances going to recover, eventually? We're pursuing insurance claims and will likely get some restitution when Sharon's convicted, but it's going to be tight for a while. We've had to cancel some planned projects and increase dues slightly. I'm sorry you're dealing with this. She smiled tiredly. You know what's ironic? If she just left you alone, we might never have caught her. Robert and I only started digging into the finances after the lawsuit drama made us question her judgment. So, in a weird way, Your pile of limestone saved the HOA. I laughed despite myself. Glad my gravel could be of service. The preliminary hearing in June was brief. Sharon's attorney tried to argue for bail reduction, but the prosecutor laid out the evidence of systematic theft and deception, and the judge maintained the original bail amount. Sharon's husband, who I'd barely ever seen around the neighborhood, looked broken sitting in the courtroom gallery. I did end up testifying, though not at the criminal trial itself, which wouldn't happen for months. Instead, I was deposed as part of the prosecution's case building. I described Sharon's escalating harassment, the violation notices, the lawsuit, and the campaign against me. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Jennifer Ortiz, seemed particularly interested in the timeline. So, Mrs. Winters' actions against you intensified right around the time the board started asking questions about finances, she asked. Based on what Robert and Patricia told me later, yes. I didn't know anything about the financial issues at the time. I just thought she was a power-hungry HOA president. Did she ever try to get you to pay fines or fees that you now know were improper? She assessed about $2,000 in fines for the pile placement and various other violations. I never paid them because my attorney advised me not to. But if I had paid, where would that money have gone? Jennifer smiled grimly. Excellent question. We're trying to trace every dollar. It's possible she was creating violations as additional revenue streams to embezzle from. The thought made me sick. How many other neighbors had she targeted over the years, assessing bogus fines they paid just to avoid hassle over the summer? More victims came forward. An elderly couple had paid $1,500 in fines for a tree that Sharon claimed violated height restrictions. A young family had been assessed fees for architectural review of a fence that was pre-approved. A single mother had paid hundreds in violations for supposedly wrong paint colors. In every case, the money went into HOA accounts and then disappeared through Sharon's fake vendor system. The neighborhood was reeling. People who'd thought they were part of a well-managed community were discovering they'd been systematically defrauded by someone they'd trusted. Property values did drop, ironically enough, though not because of my limestone pile. News coverage of the embezzlement scandal made Meadowbrook Estates a punchline in local media for weeks. Patricia and Robert worked tirelessly to rebuild trust. They brought in a professional management company to handle finances. They held town halls to answer questions and provide updates. They pushed through new bylaws that added financial oversight and limited board members' individual authority. I stayed on the sidelines mostly, but I did attend the July meeting where the board discussed elections. Patricia announced she wouldn't run for president permanently, feeling the stress was too much. Several people nominated me, which I politely declined. I'd had enough of HOA drama to last a lifetime. In August, a retired accountant named Greg Wilson was elected president. He ran on a platform of transparency and financial responsibility, and won in a landslide. One of his first acts was creating a new position, Financial Oversight Chair, with direct access to all accounts and quarterly reporting requirements. Dorothy, my lemonade-bearing neighbor, volunteered for the role. Nobody was going to sneak anything past her. Sharon's trial was scheduled for October. The prosecution had built an overwhelming case with bank records, false invoices, testimony from real vendors who'd never been paid despite the records showing payment, and a paper trail that led straight to Sharon's personal accounts. Her attorney negotiated a plea deal, guilty to embezzlement, fraud, and theft. In exchange for the plea, the prosecution agreed to recommend a sentence at the lower end of the guidelines. I attended the sentencing hearing in November. Sharon looked completely different from the imperious woman who'd confronted me about the limestone pile 8 months earlier. She'd lost weight, her hair was dull and unstyled, and she kept her eyes down the whole time. Her attorney made a statement about her remorse and struggles with gambling addiction, which was apparently where some of the money went. The judge wasn't sympathetic. "Mrs. Winters, you held a position of trust in your community and violated that trust systematically over years. You stole from your neighbors, including elderly residents on fixed incomes and young families struggling with finances. You used your position to harass and intimidate anyone who questioned you. The presentence report shows no genuine remorse, only regret at being caught." He sentenced her to 6 years in state prison, with 3 years supervised release after that. She'd also have to pay full restitution, $73,000 plus interest. Her husband filed for divorce 2 weeks later. In December, almost 9 months after the limestone pile that started everything, I was raking leaves in my front yard when Greg Wilson walked over. "Got a minute?" he asked. "Sure, what's up? The board wanted me to give you this." He handed me an envelope. Inside was a check for $2,000, the amount Sharon had tried to fine me. "We know you never paid it, but we wanted to acknowledge what you went through. Consider it compensation for your time and stress." I started to refuse, but Greg held up his hand. "Please, just take it." The membership voted on it. "You stood up to someone who was hurting all of us, even when it cost you money and peace of mind. This is our way of saying thank you." "Well, then thank you, and tell everyone I appreciate it. There's something else." Greg looked a bit embarrassed. "We're putting together a new handbook about property rights and HOA authority, making it really clear what the board can and can't regulate. Would you be willing to look it over? Give us feedback from a homeowner's perspective?" "Yeah, I can do that." That evening, I stood on my back patio, the one that stayed dry now thanks to my drainage project. The limestone was long gone, incorporated into the French drain buried beneath my yard. Grass had grown over the spot where the pile sat, and you'd never know it had been there. I thought about everything that had happened: the harassment, the lawsuit, the investigation, the criminal trial. All because I tried to fix a drainage problem on my own property. It seemed absurd in retrospect, except it had been my reality for months, but good had come from it too. The HOA had stronger financial controls now. Sharon's other victims had been identified and compensated. The neighborhood had come together in a way it hadn't before, united by the shared experience of betrayal and recovery. And I'd learned something about standing up for yourself, even when it's difficult and expensive and stressful. Sometimes the right thing to do is simply refuse to back down from bullies, whether they're wielding HOA bylaws or anything else. My phone buzzed with a text from Dorothy. "Leftover lasagna from dinner. Want to come grab some? Bill and his wife are here too. We're playing cards." I texted back that I'd be right over. As I walked across my lawn toward Dorothy's house, I noticed how quiet and peaceful the neighborhood was. Lights glowed in windows. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. Kids rode bikes on the sidewalk. It looked like any other suburban neighborhood in America. And for the first time in months, it felt like home again, not a battlefield. The Meadowbrook Estates HOA would never be the same after Sharon Winters. But maybe that was for the best. Sometimes it takes a crisis to show you where the weaknesses are, to force necessary change. My pile of limestone had been an unexpected catalyst, exposing corruption that might have continued for years otherwise. I spent that evening eating Dorothy's lasagna and losing spectacularly at poker to Bill, who turned out to have a killer poker face despite his friendly demeanor. We talked about normal things: the upcoming holidays, the Panthers' disappointing season, the new restaurant opening downtown. Nobody mentioned the HOA or Sharon or lawsuits or any of the drama that had consumed so many months. As I walked home later under a clear December sky full of stars, I felt genuinely content. The whole ordeal was over. Sharon was in prison, the HOA was healing, and my patio stayed dry when it rained. Sometimes, life really does work out the way it should. The next morning, Sunday, I slept in for the first time in months without the anxiety of potential violation notices or legal mail. When I finally got up around 9, I made coffee and sat on my porch with the newspaper. A few neighbors waved as they walked dogs or retrieved mail. Normal, peaceful. Exactly what a Sunday morning should be. Mitchell called around noon. "Hey Connor, just wanted to let you know that the court processed the final dismissal of the HOA's lawsuit. It's officially closed. The file's been sent to storage." "That's great news. How are you doing?" "Really doing, I mean." I thought about it. "You know, I'm good. It was a rough few months, but I don't regret standing my ground. Nor should you. You were right from day one. Not everyone has the backbone to fight when they're right. Most people would have just moved the pile and let Sharon bully them. Maybe. But that's not the kind of person I want to be. Good man. If you ever need anything else, you know where to find me, but hopefully your HOA dramas are behind you now." We hung up, and I went back to my peaceful Sunday. I spent the afternoon watching football and meal prepping for the week. My life had returned to blessed normalcy. Monday at work, my coworker Jennifer asked how things were going with my HOA situation. She'd heard bits and pieces over the months. "All wrapped up," I said. "The board president went to prison for embezzlement and the lawsuit got dropped." Jennifer's eyes went wide. "Prison? For HOA stuff? Long story. But yeah, turns out she was stealing from the HOA for years. My situation just brought it to light. Man, and I thought my HOA was bad because they complained about my garden gnomes." We laughed, and I realized I could laugh about it now. The stress and anger had faded, replaced by the satisfaction of having stood up for myself and inadvertently helped my community. Christmas came and went. The Meadowbrook Estates HOA hosted a holiday party at the clubhouse, the first social event since the scandal broke. Greg Wilson gave a short speech about moving forward and rebuilding trust. About 70 people attended, nearly the whole neighborhood. There was food, music, and a gift exchange for kids. I brought cookies and ended up in a long conversation with Patricia about her plans to step down from the board entirely come spring. "I need a break," she admitted. "The last year has been exhausting, but I'm proud of what we accomplished." "The HOA is in better shape now than it was before Sharon, honestly." "You did good work," I told her. "You and Robert both. You could have just let things slide, but you didn't." "Neither did you," she pointed out. "Your refusal to back down is what started the scrutiny. We owe you a debt." As winter turned to spring, life in Meadowbrook Estates continued its return to normal. The professional management company's quarterly report showed healthy finances with no irregularities. The new oversight procedures were working. A few families who'd considered moving after the scandal decided to stay. In March, almost exactly a year after the limestone delivery that started everything, I was working in my yard when a delivery truck pulled up. My heart rate jumped instinctively, but I quickly reminded myself those days were over. The driver hopped out with a clipboard. "Connor Adams, got a delivery of mulch for you." I'd completely forgotten I'd ordered mulch for my flower beds. "Yeah, that's me. You can dump it right there near the driveway." The driver positioned the truck and released 3 cubic yards of dark mulch onto my property, well within my boundaries. I signed the delivery receipt and watched the truck drive away. Dorothy came out of her house, smiled, and called over. "Looks like you're doing some landscaping. Need any help?" "I'm good, but thanks." "Well, if you need lemonade breaks, you know where to find me." I spent the afternoon spreading mulch around my azaleas and hostas, satisfying physical work that required just enough attention to be meditative. The pile of mulch gradually shrank as I wheelbarrowed load after load to various beds. No violation notices appeared. No HOA presidents accosted me. No survey crews showed up uninvited. Just a normal home improvement project on my own property, exactly as it should be. When I finished, I stepped back to admire the work. The fresh mulch looked sharp against the green of emerging spring plants. My yard looked well maintained and cared for, the kind of property any HOA should be proud to have in their neighborhood. Greg Wilson happened to walk by with his dog and stopped to look. "Nice work, Connor. Yard looks great." "Thanks. Just some spring refreshing." "Hey, I've been meaning to ask you. Would you consider joining the Architectural Review Committee? We're rebuilding it from scratch, and I think your perspective would be valuable." I considered it. A year ago, I would have refused immediately, wanting nothing to do with HOA governance. But things were different now. The HOA had changed, and so had I. Can I think about it? Of course, no pressure. But the offer stands. That evening, I sat on my back patio with a beer, watching the sun set. My phone buzzed with a message from Bill. "Poker night this Saturday. Dorothy's hosting." "You in?" I texted back. Definitely. Life was good. The drama was behind me. The neighborhood was healing. And I had a pile of mulch that nobody cared about except me, exactly as it should be. Sometimes you have to fight for what's right, even when it's hard. Sometimes standing your ground means legal bills and stress and conflict. But sometimes, just sometimes, it all works out. The bullies face justice, the community comes together, and you get to keep enjoying your home in peace. I raised my beer in a silent toast to the limestone pile that started it all, now buried safely beneath my yard, doing exactly what I'd intended, keeping my patio dry and making my home better. And that, really, was all I'd ever wanted.